shield them. He argued this could damage a business like the Catholic Church. In Utah, the anti-bailout Senate candidate, Mr. Lee, insists on not raising the liability limits for the next BP from $75 million to $10 billion. You have a set of settled expectations that you give to a business when it decides to make an investment in this. Our country benefits from this type of activity. Asked by the Salt Lake City Tribune if that's a kind of bailout, if it leaves taxpayers on the hook for part of the damage, Lee admitted, well, yeah, probably does. Mr. Paul of Kentucky called the nationwide pressure on BP to increase its damage payments un-American. He is also opposed to federal mine safety regulations. The bottom line is, I'm not an expert, so don't give me the power in Washington to be making rules. You are here, and you have to work in the mines. You try to make good rules to protect your people here. If you don't, I'm thinking that no one will apply for those jobs. Mr. Paul's admission that I'm not an expert does provide one of the few dovetails of this campaign. It matches nicely with Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, who refuses to offer any specifics about his plan to deal with homeless veterans. He says, quote, this election is not about details. Details have proved devilish for the Tea Party and Republican candidate for the 2nd District of Virginia, Scott Ridgell. He campaigned against the stimulus bill, including the Cash for Clunkers program. Mr. Ridgell is an automobile dealer and made hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Cash for Clunkers program. The Tea Party and Republican candidate in the Missouri 4th, Vicky Hartzler, says she and her husband are just small business owners. We just want the government to leave us alone, she said. Hartzler and her husband have a farm. In the last 14 years, that government, they want to leave them alone, has given them subsidies totaling $774,000. Mr. Racy of West Virginia told the Associated Press that America is in an industrial coma. He blamed the restrictor plate that is a bloated federal government. I can't think, he added, of very many times when a government agency has helped me. The companies Mr. Racy owns have received $2.4 million in contracts from the federal government since 2000 and $32 million in contracts from the state government since 2000. Back in Colorado, Mr. Buck apparently thought he was just speaking to a campaign worker when he self-exposed his hypocrisy. In fact, he was talking to a Democratic operative with a recorder in his pocket. Out of the blue, Tea Party nominee Buck blurted, quote, will you tell those dumbasses at the Tea Party to stop asking me about birth certificates while I'm on the camera? God, what am I supposed to do? The contempt of Mr. Buck towards his own Tea Party extends in many cases to reporters and thus by proxy to actual citizens. For instance, the Tea Party and Republican candidate for governor of Maine, Paul LePage, threatened to punch a radio reporter. The Tea Party and Republican candidate for governor of New York, Carl Palladino, threatened to take out a reporter from the most conservative newspaper in any major American city. A spokesman told the reporter that he was now off the Palladino mailing list, which has in the past consisted of emails featuring racism, pornography, and bestiality. Mr. Miller's private security guards in Alaska detained and handcuffed one reporter and threatened to handcuff two more without any legal right to do so at an event at a public school. The security company was operating with an expired license. Its chief has links to extremist organizations, and the defense was that the guards didn't know the individual was a reporter, which implies it would have been just dandy to handcuff an ordinary citizen. Ms. O'Donnell threatened to sue a Delaware radio station if it did not destroy the videotape of her interview there. When she did not like a question, she snapped her fingers at her own press aide, then shoved him. The campaign manager threatened to crush the radio station if it did not comply with them. The Tea Party and Republican candidate for the Senate from Florida, Marco Rubio, dreams more of deportation than of crushing. He said in March, quote, there are millions of people in America that hate our country, so why can't we just do a trade? We'll send you Sean Penn, Janine Garofalo, and Keith Olbermann, and you can send us people that actually love this country. This, incidentally, carries with it a tinge of irony. I don't know that any of his opponents has ever accused Mr. Rubio of not loving this country. He just doesn't love a lot of its people. And the person they all love the least is, of course, the president. The Tea Party and Republican candidate for Congress from the Florida 22nd, Alan West, had to leave our military after threatening to kill an Iraqi he was interrogating in Iraq. Now he claims to have a higher security clearance than does the president. Mr. West also told his supporters that they could defeat his Democratic opponent by making the man afraid to leave his own home. And the Tea Party and Republican candidate for the House from the Michigan 7th, The ex-Congressman Tim Walberg wants to blackmail the president into showing his birth certificate to Rush Limbaugh. He figures he can extort this from President Obama by threatening to impeach him. You are willing to let these people run this country? This is the America you want? This is the America you are willing to permit? These are the kinds of cranks, menaces, mercenaries, and authoritarians you will turn this country over to? If you sit there next Tuesday and let this happen, whose fault will that be? Not really theirs. They are taught that freedom is to be seized and rationed. They can sleep at night having advanced themselves and their puppeteers, and to hell with everybody else. They see the greatness of America not in its people, but its corporations. They see the success of America not in hard work, but in business swindles. They see the worthiness of America not in its quality of life, but in its quality of investing. They see the future of America not in progress, but in revolution to establish a kind of theocracy for white males, with dissent caged and individuality suppressed. They see America not for what is nor what it can be. They see delusions, specters, fantasies. They see communists under every bed and a gun in every hand. They see tax breaks for the rich and delayed retirement for everyone else. They fight the redistribution of wealth, not because they oppose redistribution, but because their sole purpose is to protect wealth and keep it where they think it belongs, in the bank accounts of the wealthy. They want to make the world safe for Bernie Madoff. But you know better. If you sit there next Tuesday, if you sit there tomorrow and the rest of this week and you let this cataclysm unfold, you have enabled this. It is one thing to be attacked by those who would destroy America from without. It is a worse thing to be attacked by those who would destroy America from within. But it is the worst thing to sit back and let it happen, to not find the time and the means to convince just one other sane voter to put aside the disappointment of the last 2 years and look to the future and vote. Because the disappointment of the last 2 years, those will be the good old days in a Tea Party America. This is the week in which the three-card Monte dealers hope to take over the government. The candidates who want their own way, who will say anything to make palatable their real identities as agents of regression, repression, and corporate sovereignty. They are here. They have energized the self-serving and the greedy and the proudly ill-informed. And if no other fact convinces you of your obligation to vote and canvass and phone and even drag to the polls the most disheartened moderate or Democrat or liberal or abandoned Republican or political neutral to vote for the most tepid of the non-insane candidates, if no other detail hands you that spark of argument with which to invigorate the apathetic, you need only commit to memory the words of Stephen Brodin and Sharon Angle. She can run from reporters, but she cannot run from this quote from January and all the horror and insurrection it implies. Thomas Jefferson said it's good for a country to have a revolution every 20 years. I hope that's not where we're going, but you know, if Congress keeps going the way it is, people are really looking towards those Second Amendment remedies. Sharon Angle, too subtle for you? Second Amendment remedies? Guns instead of elections? Too implicit? Fortunately, to our rescue, to the speeding of the falling of the scales from our eyes, comes the Tea Party and Republican nominee for the 30th Congressional District of Texas, Pastor Stephen Brodin. Our nation was founded on violence, he said, on tape. Was armed insurrection, revolution an option in 2010? The option is on the table. I don't think that we should ever remove anything from the table. However, it is not the first option. Thank you. The attempt to overthrow the government of the United States by violence is not the Tea Party's first option. Next Tuesday is the first option. The words are those of Nedrick Young and Harold Jacob Smith from the screenplay from the movie Inherit the Wind. As the attorney for the man on trial for teaching evolution, Spencer Tracy cuts to the gist. Fanaticism and ignorance is forever busy and needs feeding, and soon, Your Honor, with banners flying and with drums beating, we'll be marching backward through the glorious ages of that 16th century when bigots burned the man who dared bring them enlightenment and intelligence to the human mind. The angered judge replies, I hope counsel does not mean to imply that this court is bigoted. The attorney mutters, well, Your Honor has the right to hope. The judge warns, I am